The last season of the White Lotus just finished up, and it seemed to be one of the most crazy and overwhelming seasons to date, with an absolutely bombastic finale. I mean, an hour and a half long episode, having to finish up the most amount of plot lines and character arcs in the series, was definitely a lot. But it got me thinking, how does this season stack up as a whole when compared to the other two? Were the plot lines and stories told on par, better, or even worse than those of their predecessors? Ranking the plot lines would also be a great way to gauge how strong the storytelling and character evolutions are in a specific season. At the end of the video, after I go through and rank all these plot lines, I will see how they all work together as a whole and see overall which leads to having the best season. First, when trying to define a plotline, I saw it as a sequence of events happening throughout the story surrounding a specific character or a group of characters in the narrative. With the White Lotus' structure, we at least know that every plotline ends at the end of each season. So I'm not going to be discussing like an overarching plotline, which, to be fair, the only one that is in the show is Greg's story across 3 seasons. However, I would argue he is never the center of any plotline. Rather, there are 3 plotlines across each of those 3 seasons that just happen to involve him. Which brings me to my last point before we jump in. Not every character gets their own plotline. Some do, like Piper's spiritual discovery in Season 3, or Arman's drug addiction in Season 1. Some characters I tend to group together as their plotline revolves around the relationship with another character, like Olivia and Paula's evolving friendship in Season 1, or the 3 males discovering their roots in Season 3. This does mean that there will be some characters that don't really fit into one plotline as a whole, rather being heavy supporting roles that influence other plotlines. Some examples of this include Lockie in Season 3, having an effect on Saxon's, Tim's, and Piper's plotlines in Season 3, as well as Lucia in Season 2, having an effect on low-key every single plotline of that season, except for Tanya's, because that whole gay people conspiring to assassinate her plotline was so out there that it ended up being pretty isolated from every other character that season. Well, besides Portia, who experienced some crazy terrifying shit, but we'll get to that later. Anywho, with all that being said and done, there are 18 plotlines in total, 6 from Season 1, 4 from Season 2, and shockingly 8 from Season 3. So, starting at number 18 is one of the dumbest and most pointless plotlines, which is Fabian the manager's singing plotline. This Season 3 plotline was so unimportant to the narrative and to the themes of the season that I'm shocked it made it into the show in the first place. This is especially crazy when you look at the impact and layered storylines of the other managers in Seasons 1 and 2. I will say this plotline was ironically one of the funniest plotlines because the show treated it the same way the characters seemed to treat it. They just didn't care. Every time Fabian was on screen, I feel like he mentioned wanting to sing for his guests, who really didn't seem to give a shit. And then when he finally got that opportunity to sing, the show cut it after like 10 seconds and never brought it up again. Poor Fabian, man deserved so much better. Maybe one day he will learn to finally pronounce Tritala's name all by himself. At number 17 is Tanya and Belinda's plotline about starting their own business together. I know this was a pretty big focus of the first season and was very heavy on the themes of that season, but I don't know, I always felt kind of bored by the plotline. It felt like nothing was happening throughout the season except for Belinda just kissing up to Tanya because Tanya had all the power in the financial situation. Granted, Jennifer Coolidge was great in this role, which is why they brought her back in Season 2, but I digress. The concept as a whole was interesting, but I also just felt super uncomfortable by it. Like, I just felt bad for Belinda the whole time, while Tanya just felt like a moron. I just feel like every time this plotline came on, I just wished it would go back to the other ones. Like, the best scene, including Belinda and Tanya, was the scene where Tanya scattered her mom's ashes on the evening boat ride. But even that was interesting because of the conflict between Shane and Armand, and we got to see Shane's reactions. At the end of the day, it wasn't a bad plotline, and it fit with the theme of the season, but I felt like the others in the season were just way more interesting. At number 16, we have Guy Talk, the security guard, dealing with being violent and confident. This plotline, like Tanya and Belinda's, was just not as enjoyable because Guy Talk just felt super annoying to me as a character. Like, buddy, why are you a security guard if you don't ever want to be violent or even confrontational? Like, I get the whole morality of him being a Buddhist, but this whole season, I just feel like Guy Talk acts like a doofus, and his relationship with Mook was kind of just weird. Like, we never saw them being close or intimate, that I genuinely thought she just wasn't interested in him. She would just egg him on to be more ambitious, which was fine, but it felt out of place when compared to the other stories of the season. Mook also came across as a little manipulative sometimes, while Guy Talk just came across as a little bit of a pussy. Like, he confronts Tim, and then nothing. Valentin confronts him to not tell on him after the robbery, and he doesn't. Like, Bud doesn't learn anything by the end of the season and then gets rewarded for some bullshit luck in shooting Rick, all because Shritala is just shrieking at him. I feel like this plotline had a lot of missed potential in where it could have gone with his character, and especially his relationship with Mook, but whatever, let's just move on. At number 15 is Quinns Exploration of Nature in Season 1. This plotline is honestly pretty simple. It's really just about a kid discovering to get in touch with nature and forgetting about his reliance on technology, which is cool, but I don't really like how it ends. Like, the last scene of Quinn leaving his family kind of made sense thematically and for his character, but it also just seemed so unrealistic. Like, is this kid stupid? How is he gonna live here and just abandon his whole life? I don't know. I mean, that aside, his journey was endearing for the most part, but sometimes felt a little glossed over when compared to the better and more layered plotlines of this season, especially his entire family. Like, I wished it had more time to develop. Also, Quinn just felt like such a bitch to me that I wasn't even really interested in him as a character. Like, there was just no confidence there. Meanwhile, at number 14 is a plotline that pretty much takes the things I didn't like about the last one, with a character going through a similar journey, and perfects it by turning it on its head. And that is the Season 3 plotline for Piper's spiritual journey. This is the first plotline that I actually feel is at least good, and the first I would put in like a B tier. Yet it's at number 14, which just goes to show how many interesting stories are told in the White Lotus. Unlike Quinn's ending, which I didn't like, Piper's I loved. The scene in the finale where she breaks down to her parents about being upset that she likes having the wealth and privilege was fantastic, and had great acting by Sarah Catherine Hook. It was easily a top 5 scene of the season, and it more than made up for the fact that this plotline just didn't have much screen time, especially in the early episodes. Like, we don't see Piper on her own doing stuff like going to the monastery until like halfway through the season. But when it does start to happen, it is pretty cool. Lockie and Victoria are also great supporting characters for her journey, especially Victoria, because Parker Posey is just so funny. Like, this plotline would have been higher if it just got more screen time. Like, apparently in the finale, Piper loses her virginity to Zion off screen, which would have been a very good ending to her character, but they just kind of cut it out for some reason. At number 13 is the first Season 2 plotline on this list, and that's Mia and Valentina's plotline. I know this one is technically 2 stories over the course of the season, but I grouped them together because I feel like they are very connected and won't work without the other. Like, them coming together near the end of the season and having Mia let Valentina finally try a lesbian experience felt super satisfying, especially after we see that Isabella likes Rocco and not her. This plotline also just has some really funny shenanigans, such as Mia not knowing what drug was Viagra and accidentally causing a scene with the pianist, or some gut-wrenching scenes such as Valentina realizing that Isabella was engaged to Rocco. At the end of the day, this plotline had a really entertaining flow, but it's still the weakest of the Season 2 plotline, because I felt like it took a lot of time just to get to some of the juicier scenes later in the season. Like, I was super uninterested in their characters for the first half, but the second half definitely made up for it. At number 12 is Rachel and Shane's relationship in Season 1. This was arguably one of the most important plot lines of the first season, and was especially important when it came to the themes of the season involving wealth. Like, the show did a really good job of making Shane despicable and Rachel sympathetic, but at the same time, I was also just kind of annoyed with both of their characters, kind of like Gaitok and Mook from before. Like, Shane was such a dick, I couldn't figure out why in the world Rachel put up with him, especially when we found out that she didn't really value the wealth and wanted to be a journalist. Meanwhile, Rachel also kind of came across as a vanilla protagonist, and her decisions of putting up with Shane just pissed me off. However, even though I didn't like the characters that much, the plot developments and story as a whole hardcore carried. Stupid arguments like Shane being mad and not getting the right room, or having his mom visit, were super funny and definitely kept ramping up the stakes, which is why it's at least a pretty solid plotline and one I overall liked. Its resolution kind of sucked though. There like kind of wasn't one, and I don't mind ambiguous endings as we'll see later, but I feel like theirs kind of just was that Rachel comes back to him, but like, that's it. I don't know. Is what it is. Coming in at number 11 is Rick's revenge plotline in Season 3. This plotline honestly varied from episode to episode on either being good or not. Like, it started with a slow setup, and we as the audience are learning Rick's motivations from the perspective of Chelsea. That was pretty good. Then it had a whole episode of Rick getting cooked off laced weed and letting snakes go. Sure, I guess. Like, Chelsea gets bitten and then he's like, oh no, and then he has to go to Bangkok the next day anyway. Glad that episode is over. Then, after we learn Rick's motivations, it completely switches to his perspective, as he goes to Bangkok and Chelsea becomes an important character for other plotlines like Saxon's, which we will get into later. This was also pretty good. However, when Rick meets with Frank and we get that banger-ass monologue from Sam Rockwell, complete with tons of Rick's reactions that will be memed up to eternity, it seemed to be going pretty steadily up. Like, I'm really interested so far. The confrontation scene is also pretty good, and also low-key funny, because Rick just doesn't know what to do with Jim when he meets him. But then, once again, we get nothing for like half an episode as we see Rick just hanging out with Frank in Thailand, which was just low-key boring and I felt like pointless. However, I will at least say the finale does at least have some fun conclusions, with that shootout scene and Rick going off the rails. This makes up for a lot of the mid and slow scenes in this plotline, especially the whole snake episode, which is why I'm just about putting it below the halfway point. But the reveal of Jim being his father was also revealed super last minute, and then didn't seem to impact anything. Whatever, this is a frustrating plotline because it does have some good stuff, but it also has some bad stuff. Let's move on. Finally, we are just reaching the top 10, with number 10 belonging to Tim's struggle with telling his family about their eventual loss of wealth from his silly business dealings. This was a wildly unexpected plot reveal when it first hit, and was overall one I liked a lot throughout the season. Seeing Jason Isaacs play a man slowly unraveling and contemplating killing his family and self was wildly interesting. I mean, my goat Lucius Malfoy just can't seem to catch a break as the head matriarch in a wealthy family. The only reason this plotline is only number 10 was because I felt like it was a bit slow and didn't have much development throughout the season. Instead, we just got to deal with Patrick Schwarzenegger, Sarah Catherine Hook, and especially Parker Posey complain about not being able to live poorly, while Jason Isaacs just looks petrified in the background, which are all great, but like nothing happens for like most of the season. I will say it does have some hype scenes that are always so juicy, like Tim going to talk to the monk at the monastery, or Tim's conversation with Gary on the boat, or honestly anything that happens in the final episode. I mean, the coconut milk is off! All in all, this was a solid plotline and one of the better ones of season 3. I just wish we got to see Parker Posey and his family's reactions to being poor. Like, that would have moved the plotline up a few spots if we had just gotten like 5 minutes at the end to see their reactions. Moving on to number 9 is Belinda and Greg's plotline in season 3. This was one that honestly had the best overall pacing and raising of stakes over the course of the season. Like, it started slow with Belinda just getting introduced to the resort and her relationship with the porn man, or whatever his name is. I know it has porn in it, or whatever. But once she finally starts having her scenes with Greg, it really ramps up. I will say, those last few episodes and moments are really the reason this plotline is so high on the list. Like, Tim's, you could argue, is overall better, but I feel like, for the most part, not much happens, while Belinda's has a great ending and fantastic stakes growing over time. Like, the moment Zion is introduced and you see his relationship with Belinda, it gets hundreds times better. The negotiation scene in the finale is great. I mean, let's go Team Gary, but what really made this plotline is Belinda's final dialogue scene with the porn man, where she doesn't start the business with him by saying no in a very similar manner to how Tanya did to her in season 1, which was a fantastic callback. At number 8 is a season 1 plotline, and that is Olivia and Paula's drama about class and how their friendship evolves because of it. To me, this was the most surprising and nuanced plotline in the first season. Like, although most of these scenes were just Sydney Sweeney and Brittany O'Grady being bitchy and putting up fake fronts, when we finally got to strip them away from that, there was some really interesting stuff. That scene in the finale, where both of them are essentially breaking up but then coming together, was very moving to me. Both of them show massive envy over the other throughout the course of the season, and we got to see how each of them is impacted throughout the trip because of this. Even though using a guy to get between them is kind of basic, it did work pretty well here because it also was a representation of class, which was the theme of the whole season, but it wasn't the best Mossbacker plotline. Because at number 7, we have Mark and Nicole's marriage plotline. I have this one slightly higher than Olivia and Paula's because I think it has some crazy reveals, and the acting by Steve Zahn and Connie Britton was really engaging. Like, I felt like the plot moved forward really well, with reveals like Mark's dad liking men or Kai trying to rob them really moving the plot forward and really breaking down their relationship. I liked seeing their relationship go through multiple ups and downs before ending with them coming together. That was super satisfying. I feel I just have the least to say about these two plot lines, but they are really good, and if I were to put them in a tier list, they are ones that I would be just starting the A tier with. But they aren't the best plotline from season 1. That honor goes to our number 6 spot, Arman's gradual regression into addiction. This plotline would just simply be not this high if it wasn't for Murray Bartlett. His performance is not only engaging, but super funny. Seeing him go from his usual spiteful self against his guests, in particular Shane, to this fake, lovable persona just really made this season. It was kind of like Gus from Breaking Bad, switching between his businessman mode and his evil business dealings mode, which was just fantastic to watch. His death in the finale was also a big shock, and I was genuinely sad to see him go. Arman's plotline was also cool because it intertwined with pretty much all the others on the season, and he was arguably the main character of the first season, so we just spent the most time with him. However, even though it was the best plotline from season 1, it didn't even crack the top 5 of best plotlines in the show, which just goes to show how the White Lotus has really evolved and grown in later seasons. I do think these next 5 plotlines, plus this one honestly, are all the best parts of the White Lotus and really make this series worth a watch. Jumping into number 5 is our second to last season 3 plotline, and that is Saxon's spiritual journey. Saxon's character arc as a whole genuinely shocked me, and he became honestly my favorite character and character arc of the whole series. Seeing him go from an apathetic douche to someone willing to learn and change to better understand himself and the world around him was crazy cool. Patrick Schwarzenegger absolutely killed it in this role, and his facial reactions really sold me on Saxon's internal struggle, while his outside words showed none of that. His face in the finale as he looked longingly at Chelsea's embracing love for Rick was heartbreaking. Seeing him taking the time to start reading and believing in meditation and spirituality was very satisfying, and I love how he kept hiding his book from his family, showing his deep insecurity. His relationship with Lockie this season was also great, and the reveal of Lockie kind of jerking him off during a party was both hilarious and unsettling. All in all, this is a crazy good plotline, brought down to spot number 5 solely because it wasn't as interesting in those first few episodes, but it more than made up for it with Saxon's arc in the finale and the whole full moon party episode. At number 4 is a season 2 plotline, and that is the Degrasso family men trying to discover their roots. For those who noticed, this is the third weakest plotline of 4 from season 2. And it sits at number 4 as a whole when compared to the whopping 18 among 3 seasons. Yeah, season 2 is easily my favorite season, and this plotline is one of the reasons why. It focuses mainly on Albie, with some stuff with Dominic and Bert as more of a side character role, and yet I feel like each of them having scenes to shine and evolve as they are all so different, yet all the same. Lucia is also a great addition to this plotline, as she really shakes up the dynamics between all 3 characters. The best part of this plotline though is that it is really engaging from start to finish. We see Lucia's impact off the rip, with her being a prostitute hired by Dominic, so when she eventually starts hooking up and growing close with Albie, we know more and it causes way more intrigue. Her screwing over Albie in the end, while heartbreaking, was a great ending and lesson for Albie to learn. Portia is also a fun addition, even though she's really only in the plotline for the first half before going into Tanya's plotline for the rest of the season. Her scenes with Albie are cringy for a reason, and I love how she's juxtaposed with Lucia, who has all this confidence. I just feel like this plotline has a fun evolution, but the other 2 plotlines from the season are just ever so slightly better. But before we can talk about them, we have to mention our last season 3 plotline, and that is the trio of women and their toxic friendship, which comes in at number 3 of the 18 plotlines in the series. This story is easily the one that intrigued me the most from season 3 and kept me glued to my screen every episode. Its setup in the first few episodes was great, with each of the first 3 episodes having 2 of the women shit-talk the other one about something before setting up the conflict in the episodes to come with Lori and Jacqueline's feud about Valentina. All 3 actresses did a great job embodying 3 different women with 3 different and complex personalities where you can see the flaws and positives about each one. Michelle Monaghan felt super relatable as the accidental pot stirrer in the friend group, reminded me a lot of myself at times. Meanwhile, Leslie Bibb, although one with the least complexity, still managed to do a lot with a little, in my opinion. I mean, don't get me started about that Trumpy politics scene and her face that she makes. But the real scene stealer is Carrie Coon as Lori. Every scene she's in, she is chewing the scenery, whether it be through her outbursts or in her final monologue in the finale. Every week, this plotline kept intriguing me on where it would go, which is crazy when you realize that this is definitely not one of the main plotlines of the season. It happens fairly separate from the rest, and the only reason that it isn't number 1 or 2 is simply because its ending was just a little underwhelming. Like, Carrie Coon's final monologue, cinema, but the rest, nada. We don't really get a resolution with Valentina, or their relationship or thoughts post like the shooting. If we got that, this would have been number 2 or even number 1. But, alas, let's move on to number 2. We have 2 plotlines we haven't talked about yet. They are both season 2 plotlines, and the only ones that I think are S tier. And at number 2, I am putting Tanyas Conspiracy plotline with Greg and the gays. This is similar to the toxic trio plotline we just discussed, but in the opposite direction, as it starts off a little meh, but ends in a crazy way. Like, its first few episodes were fine in setting up Greg's disinterest in Tanya and Portia's relationship, but it isn't until Tanya meets Lord Cutler Beckett that this plotline really takes off. The reason this plotline works and is just so interesting is because it has such a sense of aura of mystery behind it. Like, the whole time, we as the audience are thinking, this is just way too good to be true. We get to see the aloof Tanya low-key be smart and start to unravel things. There is a crazy reveal, I feel like, every episode, which makes me go, what? Like, we get to see the sinister Jack, even though he came across as such a nice guy, taking Portia's phone, but it doesn't really say that. So it's like this whole mystery and fear that I feel like is cultivating this whole season. Like, what are these people doing? Cutler Beckett being fucked by Jack was crazy, and the conspiracy that they are trying to kill Tanya because they're broke was also mind-boggling. It low-key makes the main plotline in season 3 of Rick discovering Jim as his father kind of look tame by comparison. And don't get me started on that crazy finale when Tanya kills all the bozos on the boat and then accidentally kills herself because she's Tanya. It's just, chef's kiss. It's all just so outlandish, yet makes so much sense within the confines of the season and themes that it just works. I don't know how, it just does. Which finally brings us to our number 1 spot, which goes to the double couple plotline in season 2. This is a perfect story on the White Lotus. It has great build-up in the first few episodes, great character dynamics and plot progression, and a very complex and open-ended finale. On top of that, Theo James plays arguably the best villainous character in the show as Cameron. This man oozes charisma, especially when comparing him to Jake Lacey's Shane from season 1, who is just annoying and obnoxious. Aubrey Plaza plays the perfect shrewd protagonist who is really hard to read. Megan Fahey plays a fantastic side character who makes the most of every scene she's in. And Ethan is here too. Jokes aside, although Ethan's character definitely is the least interesting of the 4, he still serves as a satisfying protagonist along with Harper. Honestly, the dynamics between all 4 characters is really what makes this plotline. Like, there really aren't events that shake up their stories, rather actions taken by the 4 characters, which is really cool and something different than the others. I love the middle half of the season, where the girls and boys are separated, and both Cameron and Daphne begin to show their true selves to Ethan and Harper respectively. Additionally, their plotline works perfectly well with the theme, and I love watching both couples' sexual relationships evolve throughout the course of the season. But the best part is how the finale is explosive, yet also a little ambiguous. Like, there are a lot of things that can be inferred by the audience without the show telling us. Like Ethan and Daphne getting freaky in the finale, or Daphne's kids really belonging to her trainer and not to Cameron. Thinking about it now, with both this story and Jennifer Coolidge's, season 2 seems to do the best job with the plotlines showing and not telling. There are a lot of twists and moments throughout the episodes that are to be inferred or explained later. One example of this is when Tanya finds a picture of young Greg with Cutler Beckett, which slowly begins to clue her in on the conspiracy as well as us. This brings me to my point. After ranking these various stories being told within each season, how does each of the 3 seasons stack up if I were to average the 18 plotlines? Well, after crunching the numbers, the answer, if season 3 lives up to the hype of the previous 2, is a resounding sort of? So, y'all probably could tell, season 2 is easily the highest, with 3 of its 4 plotlines ranking in the top 4 of my list, and its weakest plotline ending up at spot 13, which is already higher than 5 other stories from seasons 1 and 3. After adding up the 4 placements and dividing by 4, it's no wonder that Season 2 ends up with a score of 5.0. So even though Season 2 is the best, which is better, Season 3 or Season 1? And funnily enough, they are shockingly close in quality. After adding up the 8 plotlines as placements from Season 3 and dividing by 8, and then doing the same with the placements from Season 1 but dividing by 6, because there are 6 of them, Season 3 ends up with a score of 10.75 on average, while Season 1 is 10.83. That is like crazy close, but it funnily backs up my feelings on the seasons. Both Seasons 1 and 3 are significantly worse than Season 2, but are pretty much equal to each other, with Season 3 just barely edging out Season 1. At the end of the day, both Seasons 1 and 3 are solid seasons of television with some flaws and boring moments, but are overall made up for with great characters, great stories, and especially these plot lines and characters to get invested in. Here's to hoping though that Season 4 reaches the highs of Season 2. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I hope you all enjoyed the video and this retrospective on the White Lotus franchise.